Forbes India and ServiceNow present the COO Collective Soiree.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and a very warm welcome to Forbes India presents ServiceNow, the COO Collective Soiree. I'm your host, Gautam Srinivasan. Well, to set the context, according to Foundry's 2022 data and analytics study, 88% of organizations agree that data collection and analysis have the potential to fundamentally change their business models over the next 3 years. Now, the ability to pivot quickly to address rapidly changing customer or market demands, that's driving the need for real-time data. But poor data quality, siloed data, entrenched processes, and cultural resistance often present roadblocks to using data to speed up decision-making and, more importantly, innovation. So, in this soiree, COOs will deliberate on how businesses can thrive and innovate new business models with the help of data. I'm going to change the script a bit and cross across the aisle and come to you, Pushkar, because we also see that it's an era of real-time data for anything that we do. But the question is, how do you balance that volume of data which is coming across to you real-time along with the potential risks? So your perspective on how to have this tightrope walk rightly done for our viewers, many of whom are leaders themselves.
Yeah, so very interesting question. See, what happens is today when we talk about the VUCA world, I think one can't really do without data analytics. But yes, with whatever transformation has happened in the past 2 years or whatever acceleration has happened in the digital world, I think there is abundance of data, as you rightly said. And one needs to be very, very selective about this particular data and also, identify whether this data can be translated into information. And when I look at this particular difference between the data and information, I look at three aspects. Number one is in terms of an outside-in perspective, wherein we're talking about, the indicators on the high frequency, or rather the high frequency indicators like GDP or GNP or, what is going to happen, monsoon, employment. So that's one part of it where, you definitely need to have a handle on that aspect. The second part is, of course, on the lag indicators, more on the results part, as to sales, revenues, and, all those aspects. But I think what is very important in terms of data points, and especially if you want to build a resilient organization, one needs to be very, very selective about the lead indicators, because that is where I think it's going to be important for any organization to do course corrections. So just to give you an example, when we talk about a lag indicator like sales performance or, the top line, bottom line, I think what matters to us, and this is something I think is very, very important, is are we really tracking the lead indicators? Like, for example, in sales parlance, it's about inquiries, it's about leads. What we track is also about how many initiatives you're talking about, what kind of meets you're carrying out, what kind of influencer management programs you're doing. So that's one aspect of it. You get to the back end also, because one is, of course, marketing, sales, that part. But when you talk about building that resilience, I think it is also about the back end. And that's where I think one needs to look at what is the kind of service backup we have, and whether I'm again, capturing data in terms of how I'm giving my service levels. So what is the rate at which I am doing my service levels? What is my open calls? What is my pending calls? How fast am I, addressing the service calls? And if I go back further, then we talk about quality. So, there are a lot of data points which needs to be looked at, first pass yield and all those aspects, because I can make out as to what the end result will be if I monitor the first pass yields. That's example. And I further go back and I now have connected machines. So, it's across the board. So when you talk about connected machines, there are certain data points one needs to manage. In terms of, what is the kind of, whether there is a balance between the machines, whether each machine is actually loaded equally. So if you have, say, multiple lines of production, am I really having a balance between them, and or are some of my critical machines, down for some time or more time, so this is the kind of thing which one needs to look at. So when you talk about this data, it actually runs through, it's a fabric which runs through the entire organization. But my take on this is that one needs to be more cognizant of the lead indicators, because that's where you can, really navigate and really address and build a resilient organization.
All right. And that's an interesting point, considering there are so many moving parts when we look at approaching data. And as you mentioned, lead indicators, that's just one side of the equation. And from a security perspective also, they need a seat at the boardroom because at the end of the day, proper security is an enabler of innovation. But to take forward one of the points that you mentioned, considering this game of constants and variables when it comes to data, how do leaders kind of action on where data-driven decision-making is going to make an impact? That's the power of digital transformation. It allows you as an organization to be the best that you can be. It's been a wonderful exchange of ideas and thoughts from all of our leaders here. And I believe Pushkar has a point of view to add. So before I conclude, I'll give him a space to add his view.
Coming from the security background, I thought that, that's something which is a missing link. Because we've been talking about data, abundance of data. But I think what is important as well, and maybe, ServiceNow would have something on that sort, is how do you store data securely? How do you transfer data securely? Because, that's going to be the real challenge. So what kind of protocols you have, in terms of encryption, what kind of protocols you have in terms of transferring the data. So I think this is going to be critical, and I think that's where GDPR, the General Data Protection regulations are coming in.
That's going to, in a sense, necessitate that conversation.
That's going to be coming in handy, but I think that's something which we need to really be cognizant of. So
Absolutely.
That's
There's
what
a PDP bill on the anvil, so let's see how that changes.
That I think is going to be a critical link, so to say. Yeah.
Absolutely. Well, these have just been
wanted
some
to
of
make a comment, because
Sunil.
you see people, process, or a technology, and there is a multiplication with only one thing, and that is data.
All right.
That's where, it becomes at most important to look at that perspective.
It's always a people, process, and technology with the plus, but at the end of the day, if you add a multiply into data, the benefits expand exponentially. I couldn't have said it better myself. Thank you, everyone. It's been wonderful speaking with all of you.
Forbes India and ServiceNow present the COO Collective Soiree.